Hello and welcome to The Election Explained, the podcast mini-series from Edgehill University focusing on, you guessed it, the election. The plan is to help you understand the who, the what, the where, the when, the why and the how of the general election 2024 and hopefully take some of the pain away from voting on Thursday, July the 4th. I'm Gareth Roberts. I'm not an expert on all of this, but thankfully I am joined today by people who are. They're going to introduce themselves now, so let's start.
I'm Paula Keaveney. I'm Senior Lecturer in Politics here at Edgehill University.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Dr Ben Williams. I'm an Associate Tutor in Politics and Social Science here at Edgehill University.
Okay.
And I'm Dr Victoria Foster, and I'm Senior External Engagement Fellow here and the Director of the Centre for Social Responsibility.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so in this first episode of the mini-series, we're going to look at how to vote and why you should use your vote. There are some very important deadlines approaching as we record this, so we're going to run through these first of all. You have to register to vote by 11:59 p.m. specific on June the 18th to be able to vote in the forthcoming election. It takes about 5 minutes to do so. You can go to www.gov.uk/register -2-vote. You'll find that if you look up how to vote anyway. I've done it myself as well, I have to say, recently because I've moved house. It's really easy to do. You get a letter through to say it worked. You can also email your local council to check. I did all of those things myself. I'm ready to go. I've got a vote. I'm pleased about that. You can check if you're registered as well with your local office as well, as I say. Easy enough to find. You can also vote postally. Now, Paul, I will start with you. Why would people want to do that?
So, in the old days, it used to be because you were disabled or you were working away. But today, anybody can register to vote by post. So you might think, I'm going to be really busy on polling day. I want to make sure that I have my vote. So I'm a postal voter. I've been a postal voter for years. The vote just comes in the post. You fill the ballot paper in as you would at the polling station and you send it back.
Okay, so there you go. And if you want to do that, again, easy enough to find on the internet. The deadline to apply for a postal vote in the parliamentary general election is 5 p.m. on Wednesday, the 19th of June. But you must first be registered to vote, and that's the day before, the 18th of June. Your postal vote needs to be with the elections team at your local council by 10 p.m. on polling day. If for some reason you can't post your postal vote, you can then still take it to the polling station. Ben, I'm going to put you on the spot. Are you aware of what you need to do all this? I'm putting you on the spot here, aren't I?
You need for a postal vote or
Yeah.
a vote in general?
What you need to do a postal vote?
Well, I can give some insight to this because my daughter's just applied for one. And I know they asked for information to do with national insurance numbers and other forms of ID. The other forms I'm not 100% sure of, but I know you have to provide some personal information, obviously, to prove you are who you say you are.
Yeah.
And then from what my daughter's experience was, they get back to you pretty quickly. They got back to her within days, and she got her postal vote sorted.
Yeah.
So I think basically with some information provided, they will do it. You can probably tell me the rest of the information you need, or is there other stuff?
Yeah, so you need the address where you are registered to vote. You mentioned national insurance number, spot on. If you haven't got that for whatever reason, they will accept other identity documents, for example, a passport. You'll also need to upload a photo of your handwritten signature in black ink on plain white paper. This brings us around to something else you'll need to bear in mind during this election, ID. Now, you'll need to show ID at the polling station, a rule that even former Conservative Prime Minister Boris Johnson fell foul of in the local elections this year, despite it being legislation that he introduced while he was the Prime Minister. So he was turned away from voting because he did not have acceptable photo ID. He returned later with the necessary ID and was allowed to vote. We're thinking that a lot of people, Victoria, who'll listen to this, watch this, are going to be students, are going to be young voters, perhaps people who are voting for the first time in a general election. There's some important stuff around this, isn't there? If you're a student, I think we were talking about it just off air, weren't we, saying ID that you've got as a student is actually not acceptable on the day.
It's not, and I think this, having to have this photo ID really puts barriers up, in terms of people being able to engage in the democratic process. So I think, yes, especially for young people who might not have a passport or a driving licence, it's really quite difficult. But you can apply for a voter registration certificate. So, I would, urge people to do that. That's probably the most straightforward way of having that photo ID.
Yeah, you
if
can
you don't
use...
have the passport.
That's right.
Or the driver license.
So you can use a passport, you can use a driving licence, you can use a blue badge, you can use a proof of age identity card. But again, a student card is not acceptable. You can apply, as Victoria's saying, for a voter authority certificate. You have to do so by 5 p.m. on the 26th of June. It's free to apply. You'll need a recent digital photo of yourself, your national insurance number. You can still apply if you don't have a national insurance number, but you'll need to provide other documents to prove your identity. For example, a birth certificate, bank statement, or utility bill. So get yourself sorted, make sure that you've got your vote first of all. I'm going to introduce the idea that through this little mini-series, we are going to ask our panel some questions. These have been submitted by students and staff at Edge Hill. Hopefully we'll get to that a bit later in this one, if not in one of the future shows. But Paula, one of the things that has come up quite a lot when I've been asking round is people are saying, why do we need ID all of a sudden?
Yeah, so when I first started voting, I could rock up to the polling station, give my name, no one would query that, and they would just find my name on the list and cross it off. So this is quite a big change. It's worth saying that in lots of other countries, it's always been the case that you've needed to show an ID to vote. And when I visited these countries, people have been quite surprised that we didn't have to have ID. So why has this come in? Well, the government will say that it's been concerned about voter fraud. And there's two types of voter fraud. There are postal vote fraud, and there have been some cases of that. And there is this suggestion that people impersonate others. They go in and they vote, and they're not really that person. So the ID provision is about stopping that. Was there a lot of evidence of this happening? There wasn't a lot of evidence of that kind of fraud. But then the government would say, well, good impersonation wouldn't produce evidence because nobody would be caught. So the argument is this is about making voting safer and more secure. Every year so far we've had this. There have been some people who've been turned away and not come back. It's impossible to predict the effect of ID cards or ID provision on this election. So it'll be interesting to see if there are again cases of being sent away.
Ben, I feel like I'm picking on you here, but I'll put you on the spot once more. Voting by proxy, how do you know about that?
Well, this is when you ask or you get someone else to vote on your behalf, basically. And again, it's a similar process from the postal vote. You have to obviously fill in the required documentation. Again, traditionally, it was often done by people who were in poor health or who couldn't physically get to the polling station. I suppose now postal voting has filled in some of that gap. But yeah, that's basically getting another person to vote on your behalf if there's a reason you can't actually get there yourself.
Yeah, so certain circumstances allowed under this, including being away on polling day, being registered as an overseas voter, having a medical issue or disability, or not being able to vote in person because of work or military service. Your proxy should be someone you trust to vote on your behalf. You'll need to tell them which candidate you want to vote for, and if you want to apply online for a proxy vote, you must do so by 5 p.m. on the 26th of June. Victoria, comes to you now. We've got you specifically on this particular show to talk about some specific stuff, and Edge Hill's sort of commitment to the election is part of this, isn't it?
Yeah, I think Edge Hill's doing some really good work around the election, and we have been accredited as a Citizens UK voter registration champion, which I think is a really, really good thing. So Citizens UK is a grassroots alliance of local communities working together across England and Wales to address social justice issues. And so this is their sort of most recent and urgent campaign, really, is to ensure that people are registered to vote, that they understand about the photo ID, and that they use their vote. So that is what Edge Hill is really, committed to ensuring that our staff and students are aware of that. And that's one reason that we're, doing this podcast, because, the university is really, really keen to see that democratic engagement. And we also have a wider interest in civic engagement. So we're also doing some work in our local communities to ensure that that message is spread in the local communities of Ormskirk and Skelmersdale in West Lancashire. So we're working with our Theatre for Social Change organisation and designing some really creative pop-up activities in those areas where we can engage the general public in discussions about, to check that they understand how to register to vote and that they use their vote and they see the importance of using that vote.
And there's lots of stuff happening, isn't it, that the university's doing, sort of comms going out to students. We've got, it's worth mentioning at this point as well, we've got stuff on the website, a series of articles called The Elections Explained, so check those out if you haven't done already. I mean, the really important thing Victoria said earlier, Paul, and I know you'll be passionate about this, is you should use your vote, shouldn't you? And if you were to give a little speech on why, well, now's your time.
Yeah, so we all like to moan, don't we? We all like to say they should do this or they should do that. And this is a chance to have your say, to make your voice heard, to contribute to the decision making. And let's face it, we don't get that many opportunities, do we? General elections, on the whole, are not that frequent. So it's a chance to have your say, and it's a very simple thing to do. Now, I know there are people who will say, oh, nothing will happen, nothing will change, it's not worth it. But you know what? If you don't have your say, absolutely nothing will change. So it's really important, whichever party you support, that you think about it, you get down to the polling station or you get your postal vote and you have your say. Because you know what? If people don't join in, our politicians are not legitimate. Our government is not legitimate. And we want our government and our politicians to be there with the support of the people.
And Ben, there's some fairly recent history which shows exactly how powerful the vote is, and also maybe how powerful not voting is, because Brexit was one of the closest votes in UK history, 52% to 48%, but only 72% of people turned out for that vote. So that emphasises, doesn't it? There is a bit of a narrative that you hear in the wider world. Paula was touching on it about, they're all the same, it doesn't count, what difference can I make? That proves you can make a difference, doesn't it? It was that close.
Well, yeah, the Brexit example is a good one of how close the election result can be. And it was incidentally, the Brexit vote was one of the highest turnouts as well of recent times. It was 72%. Our election turnout's been falling in recent years. And there are people who say that when there is something to vote for that people are interested in, the turnout will go up. And Brexit was one of those issues that really sort of divided opinion, motivated people. And yes, some might say if more people had come out to vote, the result could have been differently. So there is some speculation at this election about what the turnout is going to be like. And one of the arguments that it might actually fall is because when the two parties, main parties at least, appear to be quite similar in some of the things that they're saying, some people actually feel disincentivised to vote. So I think turnout is going to be monitored in this election to see, is it going to actually go up from the late 60s, which it's been at the last couple of elections, or is it actually going to fall down further, maybe to the early 60s? Or I think the all-time low in recent times was 59% in 2001. If it went down to that level again, that would cause some concern amongst the political class probably.
And another thing important to remember as well, Victoria, is, and there's a bit of Edge Hill history in here as well, is not everyone used to have the vote.
Absolutely, and I think that's a really, really good reason to use your vote, is because people have died, for us to have the right to vote. And one of the reasons I really love working at Edge Hill is because of that. We've got that suffragette history. So we are the first non-denominational teacher training college, and our students did get involved in women's suffrage back in the day. And we've got material in our archives from the Edge Hill College magazines where our students would write about the importance of voting, and especially sort of teachers as well, and they're getting the sort of the message across through teachers about that sort of importance of being involved.
Yeah, the colours of the university as well reflect the suffrage movement. Right, well, I think we've got a little bit of time left, so I think we can go to the questions in this high-tech sweet jar. Would you like to?
Excellent. Shall I pick the first one?
You pick the first one, Paula.
Okay. So, this is all wrapped up very carefully. Oh, well, this is going to be a very difficult one to answer. What is the most reliable election poll to predict election outcomes? So we see polling just about every day, don't we? And, you know, sometimes parties are up and sometimes they're down. There's a type of election polling called MRP, which is where they take a very large sample of people and they then use a very complicated formula to apply it to individual constituencies. Because don't forget, it's the results in the constituencies that matter, not the overall national figure. And when we see these polls applied to constituencies, we often get a very clear indication of how things are going. So I would look out for anything that's got MRP in it and look at the sample size. If you're talking about a 30,000 strong sample with MRP, that's going to be very good.
Because that's something I noticed, that there are polls that are sometimes only less than 2,000 people, as an example.
Yeah, or even 450.
Yeah.
Now you might be lucky with 450 and get a good sample. You might happen to get 450 people who all accidentally think the same. So it's not true that you need massive figures, but the MRP, look for MRP when you're reading about these polls.
Excellent. Ben, do you want to go?
Go on. I'll probably get a tricky one. I'll stab at it, yeah. Thank you. So is there any evidence that TV debates help undecided voters make up their minds? Well, I mean, I suppose this is an area where there has been some debate and discussion. The one notable example I would say, which is, I think Paula would probably agree with me on this, is that the first debates in 2010, where Nick Clegg basically came to prominence. And there is some evidence that when the polls after those debates happened, there was a surge in support for the Liberal Democrat. And some people have argued that his performance in those debates were enough to determine the outcome of a hung parliament, and the Lib Dems did see a surge in their vote, and he personally, his ratings went up. So I suppose that is one example. But I mean, recently, the evidence coming through in the polls we're seeing recently is that the ones in this election haven't really made that much impact on the polls.
No, and so fewer people have been watching these debates, haven't they? I think there were 2 million fewer viewers for that first live TV debate this time round. So, yeah.
Well, what's your thoughts, Paula?
Well, I hate them. I hate them because when we go to vote, we vote for an MP in a constituency.
Yeah.
So Rishi Sunak's name will not be on my ballot paper, neither will Keir Starmer, neither will Ed Davey, neither will any of the others we've seen in the debates. We vote for our local MP. And this increasing presidential focus on leaders, I'm afraid, makes me very angry indeed. Now, the genie is out of the bottle. I can't see these debates ever being abolished in future, but it is something that makes me very sad because this is about your local MP.
We may return to this issue in one of the future episodes, OK? Do you want to go, Victoria? Fancy it?
I'll read one out, but
you don't
I
listen.
think Paula's probably better qualified to answer it.
Let's see. You never know. Yeah. It could be anything. I don't even know what's on these. There you go. Nice one.
If I just don't vote, what does it matter? It's only one vote, right? Well, no, I think it's really important to vote. And one thing I did want to say earlier as well is that I think if there's nobody you want to vote for, then go and spoil your ballot paper. And I think that's really making more of a statement than staying at home. I really do think that there's something valid. Spoiled ballot papers are counted, and it's one way. It's not ideal, but it's a way of getting a message across that you're not happy, with the way things are at the moment.
There was a seat in Scotland at a previous election where the majority was 2. So absolutely one single vote would have made a difference.
And and it, you know, it really matters. And yeah, if you vote for a party that isn't likely to win, you think, oh, what's the point of, this is a Labour majority here. What's the point of casting our vote for somebody else? It actually does increase the share, that the shares in that party receives. So it's really important.
Another thing I just wanted to ask you all, really, I'll start with you, Ben, is just, it's something I hear from some of my friends who are quite apathetic to politics. They say all politicians are the same. Now, it annoys me because I take a little bit of time to read things and can see that there's some clear difference. But, as someone who's, if this is your specialist field, politics, what would you say to someone who says all politicians are the same?
It depends about what you mean by all the same. Is it the same in the fact that they have this image of, not being very good, or do they all believe in the same things, basically? And I mean, I think the way I'd answer that is, I think most politicians actually, are in it for the right reasons, and they want to do good. They want to improve things, whatever their political viewpoints. Are they the same politically? Well, obviously, we've had recent elections in this country where there have been examples where you could say there have been clear differences. So I think if you look back to 2017 and 2019, when the Labour Party was more to the left and they were against the kind of more populist Conservative Party, there were clear divisions there. And there is an argument, actually, that drove turnout up. And there was a surge. I think 2017 was a fairly high turnout compared to some recent elections. The argument that they're the same now is that the Labour have come back to the middle, to the centre, close to the Conservatives, and possibly that might drive turnout down, because if people think there's nothing that much to choose from, it might make people disinclined to vote. But even if you look at the Labour manifesto today and the Conservative manifesto earlier in the week, if you do look through the detail, there are still differences there that you can find between the two parties.
Okay, would you add anything else to that, Paula?
Yeah, I think, it's very easy to say all politicians are the same, and this is often said by people that have never met any politicians, because, I can look at the range of people active in politics, and there are some incredible differences, aren't there, and so let's take, we could have a left-wing Labour MP in Liverpool. He's not the same as Jacob Rees-Mogg. He's not the same as Ed Davey. It's not the same as, for example, Nicola Sturgeon. So there are huge differences. Where I think there is a danger is there is a tendency now for political parties to recruit candidates from the political research, special advisor, public relations field, and that is a fairly narrow group of people. So it is important going forward that parties recruit their candidates from as wide a range as possible. So we do have the minor in Parliament as well as the barrister.
Brilliant. Okay. Just one more plug for the series of articles that are on the website under the title The Election Explained. You can find out more about the election. Look out too for the next episode of this podcast mini-series. Thanks to everyone. That has been the first one. We shall be back soon.